Next is an encounter with somebody that, as I said, gives a glimpse into an India that we can barely recognize. Before I introduce you to her and introduce the world that she occupies and has been, resisting, not just for herself, not just for her state, but for indeed all of us, to fight for a kind of society that we do want to live in. Before I do that, I'm going to ask Javed Saab to come back on stage just for 2 minutes to recite a poem that reflects the tenor and fabric of our times. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Javed Saab back just for 2 minutes.
This is like Phantom Strikes again. This is a poem that I have written recently. Naya Hukamnama means the new ordinance. One believes that languages are for communication, beside many other things, but the prime service that a language should offer is communication, that I should be able to communicate what I'm saying to you. If it fails that purpose, then it may be the best language in the world, but it is useless in a way. So, मैं जहाँ तक हो सकता है, I try to keep my language as simple, as transparent as possible. But in spite of that, sometimes it becomes unavoidable to use a word which is not very commonly used or which is very familiar with everybody. Everybody finds it familiar. So, ऐसा कोई word आपको लगे, एक दो तो मुझे ही लगते हैं, so I'll immediately translate them. और अगर आपको लगे तो आप, you raise your hand, you won't be disturbing me. As a matter of fact, it will be a confirmation that you are hearing the poem. नया हुक्मनामा. किसी का हुक्म है, सारी हवाएं हमेशा चलने से पहले बताएं कि उनकी सिमत क्या है, डायरेक्शन. हवाओं को बताना ये भी होगा, चलेंगी जब तो क्या रफ्तार होगी, कि आंधी की इजाजत अब नहीं है. हमारी रेत की ये सब फसीलें, वॉल्स, ये कागज़ के महल जो बन रहे हैं, हिफाजत इनकी करना है ज़रूरी. और आंधी है पुरानी इनकी दुश्मन, ये सभी जानते हैं. किसी का हुक्म है, दरिया की लहरें ज़रा ये सरकशी, एरोगेंस, ज़रा ये सरकशी कम कर लें, अपनी हद में ठहरें. उभरना फिर बिखरना और बिखर कर फिर उभरना, गलत है उनका ये हंगामा करना. ये सब है सिर्फ वहशत की अलामत, सिंबल ऑफ ऑब्सेसिव एटीट्यूड. ये सब है सिर्फ वहशत की अलामत, बगावत की अलामत. बगावत तो नहीं बर्दाश्त होगी, ये आदत तो नहीं बर्दाश्त होगी. अगर लहरों को है दरिया में रहना, तो उनको होगा अब चुपचाप बहना. किसी जी सरकशी, मैंने कहा एरोगेंस, एक एरोगेंट एटीट्यूड. You thought it is a title, सरकशी. Mr. Kashi got this title. किसी का हुक्म है अब गुलसिता में, गुलसिता गार्डन, महज मीन्स केवल, ओनली. किसी का हुक्म है अब गुलसिता में, महज एक रंग के ही फूल होंगे. कुछ अफसर होंगे जो ये तय करेंगे गुलिस्तां कैसा बनना है ये कल का. यकीनन फूल एक रंगी तो होंगे, मगर ये रंग होगा कितना गहरा कितना हल्का, ये अफसर तय करेंगे. किसी को कोई ये कैसे बताए, गुलिस्तां तो कभी एक रंग के होते नहीं हैं, कभी हो ही नहीं सकते, कि हर एक रंग में छुपकर बहुत से रंग रहते हैं. जिन्होंने बाग एक रंगी बनाना चाहे थे उनको जरा देखो कि जब एक रंग में 100 रंग जाहिर हो गए हैं तो वो अब कितने परेशान हैं, वो कितने तंग रहते हैं। किसी को कोई ये कैसे बताए, हवाएं और लहरें कब किसी की बात सुनती हैं? हवाएं हाकिमों की मुट्ठियों में, हथकड़ी में, कैद खानों में नहीं रुकती। ये लहरें जब कोई रोके तो दरिया कितना हो पुरसुकून, पुरसुकून शांत, और बेताब मीन्स रेस्टलेस, तो दरिया कितना भी हो पुरसुकून बेताब होता है। और इस बेताबी का अगला कदम सैलाब होता है। सैलाब मीन्स फ्लड। तो दरिया कितना भी हो पुरसुकून बेताब होता है, और इस बेताबी का अगला कदम सैलाब होता है। किसी को कोई ये कैसे बताए?
Thank you. Thank you, Javed Saab. Javed Saab's poem, in fact, is the perfect bracket within which to bring in the next session. We spoke fleetingly about this religion of nationalism that we have, our love for this country that increasingly we cannot criticize. And yet, those who do criticize it, those who do fight it, actually are its greatest lovers. And having been a journalist that has engaged a lot with those who resist the obduracies of this country, the blindnesses of this country, the soundproofness of this country, I can vouch for the fact that those who dissent and those who resist love it the most, know it the most, and value its constitution the most. So the person we're going to meet now is somebody who is extraordinary, not just in our time, but indeed in the history of the world. And in a time when we are accustomed to hyperboles, this is not a hyperbole. This is a woman who at 28, the 9th child of a class 4 worker in a veterinary hospital in Imphal, saw 10 civilians shot dead in cold blood in Manipur. And spontaneously, forgive me Javed Saab for using this phrase, but reacting with a kind of spiritual intuition, she went on a fast. That fast has lasted 16 years. We say this very easily, she's been fasting for 16 years. But I would ask you to pause and say that to yourself. She has been fasting for 16 years. No food, no water, not even dampness has entered her mouth. And yet she has been conscious through this time. She's not been in a coma, she's not been a vegetable. Willingly, consciously, with the highest degree of moral conscience, she has lived on a tube. And she has lived in isolation for 16 years, asking to be heard. And what we have met this Herculean sacrifice with is deafness, neglect. Until she broke her fast, many of you would not have heard of Sharmila Irom. Indeed, there are many Indians who have not heard of Manipur or Imphal, who would not understand why there are those amongst us, Indians, who resist this country. The last evening I was here, I spoke about India not being one country but 2 continents. And that is a reality I would imagine is our duty to bring to each other's notice again and again. The last time it was sewage workers, 2 million sewage workers that we are blind to. This time it is an entire state that we are blind to. It is a face of India that we are blind to. The world that she's been fighting for is actually democracy. She's been fighting against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. The fact that we even know that name is because of Sharmila Irom. There's Mr. Chidambaram sitting here. His government, repeatedly, when he was Home Minister, wanted to do away with the AFSPA in Kashmir, in the Northeast. But even with political will, they have not been able to do away with it. Today, when we easily speak of anger against the Kashmiris for how they feel, when we prohibit them from saying Azadi, what we are really demonstrating again and again is our ignorance of our fellow Indians' reality. Today, meeting Sharmila Irom, I hope, will give us a glimpse into realities that we do not encounter from the comforts of our homes in Delhi, Bombay, and the other metros and Gurgaon. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in honoring and welcoming Sharmila Irom.
Sure moina fadu na thamba jail to the court to the hospital the iche kapelepte moinong mai form belepte cover the asiba jahi kaya sure moina hatna ratliba Micham kaya su hat pikre ije
After sunset, when the dog barks, we will travel in the villages.
Taiwan se ayimba Malang bananda hungry crow Insegi say
And she was just shot dead in her room, lying like she died.
Democracy is a facade here.
It's a mockery.
How shall I explain? This not a punishment. I think this is my bounden duty and my best level. God gives me courage, unlimited courage. That is why I am still alive through these artificial means.
I want everybody choose me. Just a simple woman who loves peace, justice.
I am being the real embodiment of revolution.
Thank you very much, Sharmila. This is the first time that Sharmila has left Manipur to interact publicly, and it's a great honor that she's here. She hasn't been anywhere outside of her state after she broke her fast. I'll keep telling you little bits of information as we go along about Sharmila and this heroic, fight that she has led for us. I just ask you to be a little bit patient in allowing Sharmila to communicate, because she is not very proficient in English and doesn't know Hindi, and so a lot of the complex thoughts that she would like to share with us may come across in a very hesitant way. Sharmila, I'd first like to start, there are many people here who won't understand why you started fasting. Can you tell us what you felt when you saw those civilians shot dead at Malom? Why did you start fasting?
Before step into my hunger fast in 2000 November, I was just wandering around most of the noob and the corner of our step, just my being interested in human rights related issues, which were really worse in condition in our state, and here also.
Should I just put this to your mouth? Speak into the mic.
Before 2000 also, I saw lots of violent incidents which were created by the draconian law. As for an example, when I was just participated in a fact-finding inquiry, I just saw the rape woman by the armies, and hearing of her soft voice saying, "You just human rights activists came and gone, just asking and asking about the odd happenings, and made me respond, made me
Sharmila,
made me tell the things which I don't want to express repeatedly, and nothing brings from that interactions. This very woman was the daughter-in-law of a village chief. Just in front of his father-in-law, he was raped by the gang of Assam Rifles in Lamdan village. I just heard of her shocked voice. And another example was while I was just riding on my bicycle at noon, the rickshaw driver was so young and ashamed of showing off his face to the passers-by and covered with a cloth on his face, to which, while he was just sitting on his rickshaw seat, the army truck was just passing by him on the bridge, and from the front seat of the truck, who was at the middle of the seat, just stood up and sticking out a baton and struck down to the young innocent's back 3 times so hardly, only because he covered his nose and the mouth with the cloth so as to escape of his sameness to the audience.
You know, like I said, the one important thing we can do today when we are finally listening is to lend our hearts as much as our ears to what Sharmila is saying. I have had the honor of meeting Sharmila 10 years ago when very few people knew her, and we did a story on her when she was in the hospital here. She used to come several times to Delhi. This is the first time she's come as a free woman. And I had asked her then, I asked her yesterday when I met her, again, that what drove you to fast. And Sharmila has today shared these incidents which are commonplace in Manipur. Young people, much like in Kashmir, grow up with absolutely no understanding of what is the contours of peace. Because on the one hand, they're the insurgents, on the other hand, there's the state. And Sharmila's answer was that there are so many times when we keep saying we want peace, we want peace, we want peace. And I felt I had to practice it. I had to do something that would be the embodiment of peace, and that is why she went on the fast. Sharmila, again, we cannot understand how you survived this. How did you survive being in a jail for 16 years? Yes, your physical body needs was taken care of by the liquid that the hospital was force-feeding you. But how do you stay alive and not feel food and water and pleasure and love? How did you survive? What did you do to survive?
Just keeping balance of my mind and body, just following the natural phenomenon of living creatures, as me also a living being, just humbly and helplessly, I just kept alive without any hope.
Sharmila used to do about 3 to 4 hours of yoga, and the doctors have spoken about the immense, extraordinary mental will that she used upon her body. Sharmila, I asked you yesterday, you said you had this balance between your mind and body. Unfortunately, our language is a barrier between us. But can you share with us thirst? I can't imagine going 2 hours without water. You did not even brush your teeth. You did not even allow damp cotton to enter your mouth, to clean your mouth. When you were thirsty, how did you cope with it? How did you manage your thirst?
Since it was not a burden or a punishment,
just as my duty to the society, as an element of the society, and my best.
Sharmila, will you share that story you told me about the dream you had? That'll give some indication of the kind of endurance. Yes, you say it is not a punishment, and we are humbled by that because, like I said, your battle has been for all of us to make India a more humane society. Will you tell us about the dream of water that you had?
I feel ashamed.
How can you be ashamed, Sharmila? We are ashamed.
Sometimes I felt thirsty also, but I could manage it easily. It depends upon our mindset and willpower. If our food are taken away forcefully, unreasonably, we can't tolerate it with a sense of being attacked or being exploited. But when we have to tolerate it willingly and have to face it dutifully, we can manage it easily. When I felt thirst, I just thought, oh, it will pass. It will pass. And on that very day's night, in my dream, with two very big kettles on my both hands, I drank of almost the whole two kettles contents of water. So contentedly. In this way, dreams were so helpful.
Sharmila, your fast lasted so many years. In the beginning, you were hoping it would have an impact. I'm going to ask you why you stopped fasting. Did you feel a sense of failure? Did you feel the government was not listening? Did you feel people had stopped listening? But why did you break your fast? Do you feel you were not effective?
The Union Government of India con respect of non-violent protest for any cause of a democratic country from the citizen side. Since the government con respect of my genuine voice, since they made me feel of my non-violent struggle, and with pressures and lots of motivations from my surrounding. I felt I need to change my strategy of protest so as to get my goal when I'm still living in this earth. Amidst people's mindset towards me, against their version of me, I had to encounter with such objections and with extreme effort, I step forward and still I am hopeful amidst darkness for justice. And in the past, I was entitled with the word defiant lady, defiant against wrong, created by humans. In a democratic country, for governance, depending upon violence, for managing the country is really wrong in this age of civilization. And I defy it. And the Constitution, which is formed to manage the whole multicultural country, we need to intervene to amend of its provisions so as to show it with the sentiments of the different people, of different states, without any sense of discrimination, without any sense of blind interpretations.
Sharmila, like you've been saying that you felt that the government of India did not respond to your peaceful protest. And I'd just like to share with you that indeed Sharmila is the face of our united failure, because as a society we are deaf to peaceful protest. The Bhopal gas victims, the Narmada Valley victims, innumerable farmers ousted out of land, tribals who don't get land, the sewage workers we heard that day, the Bhim Yatras that come to Jantar Mantar, the farmers when they come, again in Delhi when the sewage workers go on strike, all we think of is the inconvenience it causes us, and we are deaf. The states are deaf, we as a society are deaf, the media never goes there. So Sharmila, has not said it so bluntly, but yesterday, again, when I first met her, when she arrived, I asked her, why did you break your fast? And she said, I was fed up. I was fed up that people were not responding, the state was not responding, and I had been turned into a symbol with no real meaning. And that is something that is our collective failure. That someone could go through an experience like this, and at the end, what she feels is to be fed up, you know. And I think that was, again, a moment of reckoning, certainly for me, and I'm sharing that with you for whatever it might trigger in your hearts. And I just wanted to share one other incident where a Maoist commander in Chhattisgarh, I once asked him, I said, you know, a lot of your demands are very constitutional. Why do you always go for violent means? And he said, when tribals gather around a collector's office, hundreds of tribals asking for constitutional rights, do you cover it? Does the media send people to cover it? Does the government send emissaries and mediators? But when we kill a soldier, when we kill a CRPF Jawan, when we start kidnapping your DMs and your collectors, then there is a lot of noise and our demands are heard. So that Maoist commander's voice always rings in my ears. Every time we neglect a peaceful protest, every time we neglect someone like Sharmila Irom, we are reinforcing violence as a tool of protest, violence as a tool to be heard. And that is something that Sharmila has been sharing, that it made her feel humiliated that she could be left in that hospital room, and 16 years later, there's no real discussion about withdrawing the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Sharmila, you've spoken about the government. Did you feel the people had forgotten you as well? When you've come out, people have been very angry with you. Can you explain, did you feel people had forgotten you? Did the world forget you?
On 27 August this year, when I came out of the hospital after getting an offer for my shelter from the ex-health director of state to his home for one night's stay until I got a suitable place for my settlement, since I had a vow not to enter to my home and not to meet with my mother until and unless my demand is fulfilled. That's why I had to roam about like a bird. And when I reached the locality with hospital staffs and security, people from the locality were just gathering on the street to object to my entering into the area. By then, I felt, oh, it be the will of God. Let it be blood of my heart, just with my blood, let them wash off their dark sentiments towards me. And I had to return to the hospital. But some days later, they did again welcome me for a reconciliation and had a meeting with a small feast for giving me shelter. Like that, I am hopeful of changing the whole negative sentiments of the whole society without exception of Manipur as to the repealing of AFSPA, which is a draconian law in a democratic society which only targeted to the common people.
Sharmila, I'd just like to share with you, I don't know how many of you know this, that Sharmila's mother used to live barely 500 feet away from the hospital. But in 16 years, she did not meet her mother even once, because they had taken a vow that once she began her fast, her mother would not come to meet her till AFSPA has been withdrawn. And even after she's come out of jail, yes, her mother came to meet her for 5 minutes, but she has not gone back to her mother's home. I think most of you know that quite apart from the fact that we have been deaf to her, even Manipuri society rejected her. And this is again our pasha for building symbols, that we cannot bear our symbols to be real. And Manipuri society has been very angry with Sharmila, one, for falling in love and having a fiancé, for breaking her fast, for wanting to come out and interact. She felt that she's become a symbol on whom other people are putting their thoughts, and that her real being is no longer known by the masses that she's fighting for. But she was rejected by her own community. She was rejected by the mothers of Manipur. When she went to the colony, they turned her back. And after 16 years, when she left that jail ward in the hospital, she had to return that night back to the same hospital room because nobody would accept her for having broken her fast. And I asked Sharmila again how she has coped with this. And again, as I said, language is a barrier, but I think it was profound. And she said, these 16 years have taught me to adapt to any circumstance. And that is how she has coped with this very, very difficult time. Sharmila, I'll just ask you 2 more questions before I ask 2 other people, Colin Gonzalez and Bablu, who's an activist from Manipur, who have also been fighting for the rights of Manipur and us. I don't know how many of you know that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act allows both the Manipuri commandos and army officers, army jawans in a disturbed area, in a conflict zone, to arrest and shoot on suspicion and without a warrant. There are 1,538 encounter deaths that have happened in Manipur over the last 10, 15 years. In 2008, there were 498 encounters. In 2009, there were 395 encounters up until July 2009. That is the kind of environment that Sharmila has been fighting against. I'll ask her 2 questions. Mr. Chidambaram, since you're here, if you're willing, I would urge you to say a few words about your opinion on AFSPA, and then we'll call Colin and Bablu onto the stage. Sharmila, I wanted to ask you, before I ask you what is the message of peace, what do you want to bring to Manipur by standing for elections? One question to understand you as a human being. Since you've come out of jail, what things make you happy? What have you done? How are you experiencing the world? What does it feel like to eat food?
There's such long isolation and perseverance without any taste of food through my mouth. Every eatable things are more tastier than before. And as to the people's sentiments towards me also when I, along with the volunteers, youth volunteers, went to different districts to interact with many persons. I got so much positive response and encouragement as to my new steps, so as to enter into politics, to sense the dirty politics of money and muscle power. Their encouragements are also a sign of God's blessing, and I just want the people and the the intellectuals and the politicians of the whole country be sensitized about the needs of repealing this draconian law, a discriminatory law, which is just the imitation of the colonial law of Armed Forces Ordinance Act of 1942, when India was a colonial country under British, when the Indian masses held the movement of quit India of the British. That very draconian law, Armed Forces Ordinance 1942, was imposed to suppress the voice of the people, and following that very act, just changing in the name in this time of independence of India, only to the northeast states, and Jammu and Kashmir is just a racism, I think, and it's so discriminatory.
Sure.
If the union government really want the real integration of India, it needs to respect the sentiments of the backward and the discriminated states, and we need our connection of hearts with loving kindness.
Yes. Sharmila, I wanted to just share a couple more things with you. Like Sharmila has been saying, that we need this connection of hearts with kindness and love and understanding, and an integration that's based on equality, dignity. Sharmila has been traveling to different parts of Manipur. Manipur is an extremely fractured society, very many warring factions. There are 40 militant groups there. You know, there's the army and the commandos, the police commandos, all creating a culture of impunity because of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. But even as Sharmila has been easing back into a life of eating and normalcy, she has already begun to travel from village to village, taking this message of peace, trying to de-symbolize herself and become a real human being in people's minds, taking a message of building peace and reconciliation, as she said. Sharmila, I just want to share one thing. It may sound frivolous, but it is again to bring home the experience. I asked Sharmila what she did when she came out of jail. And quite apart from this relish for eating, which we can't even begin to understand, she said that she climbed a guava tree. And just climbing that guava tree again is a reminder of what these 16 years of imprisonment has been. I also heard her talking to another young person. And in a way, she wants to not speak that much about how angry people are for her having a relationship and a fiancé. But it is again a reminder, and she heard of another young person who has love in their life. And she was delighted, and she said, I'm so glad. That is the taste of life. And it is to remind us that out of this immense courage, symbols are created, but symbols also are real human beings. And we have to engage with that for them not to just become empty cardboard conversations and headlines, and not ever to be confronted again with someone so epic and to be confronted with their sense of failure after a kind of epic sacrifice like this. So thank you very, very much for being here, Sharmila. I'd like to ask all of you to honor her by standing up.
Thank you very much.
Before I call Colin and Bablu onto stage, Mr. Chidambaram, may I ask you to speak a few words about AFSPA and what you think about it? Will you? Okay. Bablu and Colin are two other extraordinary men. We've spoken of the personal endurance of Sharmila, but there are also others who fight very strongly to keep us a democratic society. Colin Gonsalves is a lawyer who has stood behind every big issue in this country, the rights of Binayak Sen, the rights of Soni Sori, the rights of innumerable Muslims who are arrested without any evidence. For every unpopular cause, there is one man to turn to in this city of ours, in this deaf city of ours, and that is Colin Gonsalves. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colin on stage. Bablu has also traveled a long distance. Bablu has been the voice for Sharmila and innumerable other fights outside the jail. He has been knocking on our doors, knocking on media doors, on legal doors, on government's doors. But also Bablu has single-handedly helped to keep the issue of these 1,500 people falsely encountered alive. He took the case to court, and the Supreme Court in this year, in July, has declared that all 1,500 encounter cases will now be investigated. And that is what Bablu has achieved. Colin argued that case in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has also punctured this culture of impunity by saying that the army cannot enjoy absolute immunity. It is not part of the Constitution, and from now onwards, any encounter death, whether of a militant or of an innocent, will be investigated. That is the joint outcome of their fight. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bablu and Colin. Colin, I'd like to start with you. First of all, congratulations, both of you. It is a huge, huge achievement that these cases are now going to be investigated. Earlier, it wasn't even accepted that there are false encounters. Colin, I'd like to ask you, people are often confused in conflict zones when there are 40 militant groups and the army is being called to fight these conflict situations. Why is it wrong to use force? Why are we more critical of the army and of our own forces than we are of militants? Can you help us understand that?
Well, in conflict zones generally, there would be two situations existing side by side. The first is where militants exist and they attack the forces, and the forces retaliate and kill them. right? That's permissible in law. It's self-defense in a sense. And it's a civil war where certain sections of society attack the police or the army, and the army retaliates. That's perfectly legitimate. And I think it is misunderstood that human rights activists say that no matter what, the killing is not acceptable. If there's a civil war, we stay out of it. If there's a clash between armed groups and the police or the army, we stay out of it. Because that's not something we can, with any authority or legitimacy or knowledge, comment on what exactly happened in that situation. We're not concerned with that. We are concerned with a very big situation, the alternative side, whereas in Manipur you had 2,000 people killed in what we call fake encounters. And a fake encounter is an encounter where, of course, the police and the army say we were attacked, we said stop, they didn't stop, we opened fire, we shot them, they lay dead, that's it. That's their story. And then you have the story of the mothers of the persons who've been killed, and the mothers will tell you a totally different story, and they'll say, he was at home, he was having dinner, the forces came in, dragged him out by the collar, and took him away, and 2 days later, we heard on radio that he's been caught in a jungle and killed. Now that's obviously a fake encounter because he was in custody, obviously interrogated, obviously tortured. And when you decide you've got as much information out of him as you possibly could, then you take him to a remote spot and you shoot him dead. Manorma, the young lady, taken at night, blindfolded, taken right across the city for 2 or 3 hours. You're not supposed to do that. When you arrest, you take her to the police station. Raped by Javans, 17 Javans of the Assam Rifles, and now there's a commission of inquiry on this which found that she was raped and killed. And then to cover up for their rape, they allow her to run in an open field. She tries to run. And the story of the army is she made a pretense that she wanted to squat to urinate. And using that time available to her, she ran in an open field. We said, stop, stop. She didn't stop, so we shot her. And we killed her like that. And the inquiry found, the commission of inquiry, the official commission of inquiry of the Manipur government found that she was shot several times in the back, several times in the front, several times in the vagina. And the firing was at close range, which means the story that they were firing from 100, 200, 300 meters was false. Firing was at close range. And it was a case of pure murder. So can you imagine, this single case is 1,528 fake encounters. Can you imagine? Now, what does it mean? It means that there are two systems within the army and the police. One is a case where you genuinely fight against the army and police, and as I said, as a human rights activist, I would pin a medal on a policeman or an army personnel who risks his life to fight a terrorist. I would do it without any qualms, happily. And there's a second system where people are just picked up. Perhaps on suspicion, God knows what it is, and a policeman or an army officer will decide to kill. That is awesome. That is terrible. That has frightening consequences for a democratic society. If for 30 years, society, all of us, you and I, we kept quiet when the people of Manipur were, being tortured and raped and so on. All of us kept quiet. And all of us thought, I think, at the back of our heads back of our minds we said, well, it's a situation of terrorism, who knows? Let the army decide, let the police decide. If they say they've killed somebody, so be it. No inquiry. No inquiry in 1,528 cases. And that is what the Supreme Court order, historic order, says. No matter who it is, no matter who the person is who has executed somebody, no matter who it is you've executed, there will always be an independent investigation when a person is killed. We can't have the killer tell us that the person was a terrorist, he deserved to die. We can't have the killer tell us the story of how they attacked us and so on. All right, that's your story. We want an independent body to assess and come to a conclusion as to whether your story of a genuine encounter is right, or whether the parent story and other eyewitness stories of a fake encounter. And all that I say is, democracy can only survive in this country. In Manipur, in Kashmir, to a larger extent, same problem. Democracy can only survive if we say two things: no terrorism, no compromise on fighting terrorism, that's right. But equally, no compromise on extrajudicial executions and torture. We must stand together, united on both.
Bablu, as I shared with the audience, you have been one of the pillars in Manipur, really fighting to keep these issues alive. Could you share the story of Sanjeet with the audience? Before that, could you also talk about what has been really difficult about Sharmila's fight and how difficult it has been to keep that issue and her face alive in all our consciousness?
Well, thanks.
And just speak a bit loud, please.
Sure. First of all, our journey with Irom Sharmila. I came from a slightly privileged background than Irom Sharmila. My father taught political science all his life, so when we were having dinners and lunches, Plato and Aristotle and all these things were also coming up. And my father sent me to Delhi because he wanted me to sit for UPSC exam. And my own experiences in Delhi have taught me slightly different, that I don't want to join a system where we are called chinkies and where there is a law that says you are slightly different from the rest of the country because it is the military who is going to decide whether a person lives or not lives. Many of this kind of disturbed me a lot as a student in Delhi University. And I was just graduated from the Campus Law Center when the Supreme Court of India sat on the judgment on the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. That was in 1997. I was sitting in courtroom number 1 and listening to all these arguments. When the judgment came on 27th of November 1997, we were very disappointed because the Supreme Court, we thought, would at least struck down the Armed Forces Special Powers Act because it says that a person, the army can use force to the extent of causing death. And this is a clear violation of Article 21 that Ambedkar has called the soul of the very constitution that we had. And when this word, when law gives this immunity and said you can cause death of a citizen on suspicion of disturbing public order, it creates a whole environment for people to live, and the gist of it was described by Colin Gonsalves. The immunity was a small word in the law, but the impunity that is developed out of that, the practice that goes on is huge, and the impact of which is very, very difficult for the society to bear. We thought the Supreme Court is going to strike down, but the Supreme Court upheld that law in 1997. And the first time I met Colin Gonsalves was in the India International Center when he was doing a second opinion review on an Ashoka Fellowship, I remember. And the conversation went directly into, I sounded this frustration of mine and how as a young law graduate, I'm irritated by this. And we immediately sat down and discussed the dates on when he, for the first time, was going to visit Manipur with Justice Horsbeth Suresh and Dipti and Priti, who is also in the audience now. And we decide on re-looking at the actual impact of this law on actual human beings who are living in these very difficult areas. Instead of looking at the words of the law and trying to make all these legal quibblings, you have to look at the actual impact of this law on the ground. And when Colin, Priti, and Justice Suresh came, and when we gather and organize an independent People's Commission of Inquiry, Irom Sharmila was one of the volunteers who signed up. And we had an opportunity to work together, gather this victim testimony, put it in front of the commission, and Justice Suresh's conclusion was very simple. And he said, a High Court judge said, irrespective of what the Supreme Court said, a sanction to kill can never be constitutional. And I believe he was speaking from his heart. And when Irom Sharmila plunged into this, it was exactly 1 week after we finished this interim report. It was 25th of October, I remember, in the State Guest House in Imphal. We finalized the interim report and we sent it to the Union Home Ministry. And exactly 1 week after this, Malom massacre happened, where 10 civilians got killed, and Irom Sharmila jumped into this fear. And I was just sharing, Colin, that you have to excuse us because we could never finalize that report. Initially, we thought it's going to be a question of a few days. So we left everything and jumped in with Irom Sharmila to fight this. From days, it turned out to be weeks, from weeks to months, months to years, and now it is 16 years already. My daughter, which was just born when Irom Sharmila started his hunger strike, is already in her 11th class in DPS RK Puram today, and I had a meeting, went and met her. She's already a grown-up. This is the amount of time that Irom Sharmila had sacrificed. So we have been meticulously documenting exactly the cases that Colin is talking. It's a small society. It's a very simple society in Manipur, and everybody knows who is an insurgent, who is a terrorist. This ordinary people who went with 50,000 rupees in their pocket for buying your sister's dowry, 2 days later is found with a camouflage, with a Chinese-made hand grenade saying that he's a terrorist found killed. This is the cumulative effect of 60 years of Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It has created an environment where there are incentive structures which are being created, where killing has become the norm. When you suspect someone, just kill them off, and you get 4 points to get a gallantry award and an out-of-turn promotion. And you kill this whole series of executioners, people who know nothing but just kill people, and they get gallantry awards, out-of-turn promotion. One of them is this case of Herojit, which was coming up. This is a cop who have confessed it to us that he was responsible for killing 133 people. And he confessed it that, brother, in one day, I was called on to do 7 of them. Imagine 24 hours and 8 hours you have to sleep, and out of that you have to kill 7 people. And these are the people who are glorified by the system. And at some point, he have also fallen out of that creek precisely because of this case where earlier the killing used to be done in the middle of the night. They used to do it in distant areas, isolated areas. But this whole incentive structure had created such an audacity among the police commandos that they do it right in the middle of the market, right in front of the cameras of the journalist. And it so happened that in this 23rd July incident of 2009, the entire episode of this young man speaking to the police commando mildly, taken inside into a pharmacy, shot inside and brought out, was captured. All of them were captured in a camera of a journalist. And this poor journalist wanted to publish this in his newspaper. And when everything was set in the middle of the night, his editor came and said, no way. We cannot do this because we want our newspaper to run tomorrow and day after. And if we publish this, we are finished. So he could not publish this. Next morning, the journalist and his friend came to us, and I sent an email to Tehelka, and this was published in Tehelka, and this heaven broke down, and Manipur was again in complete chaos thereafter, clearly seeing this sequence. Everybody knew, from common sense, what was happening, but for the first time, we have a clear evidence of what was happening. And the person who shot and pulled this trigger was this Herojit, and Soma and myself have just testified in front of the Sessions Court in Manipur because of this photograph which was published, and the trial is still going on. So this is a mess that we have made out of this, what Jawaharlal Nehru once upon a time called the Switzerland of the East. Now we are at best Bosnia of the East. And so this cycle of violence is such that once you start triggering off and once the state become a party to the conflict rather than a neutral body who is trying to deal with it with distance and compassion, this is the mess that we have created. In a way, the Supreme Court case, which Colin has been very ably arguing, we are able to gather 1,528 such cases. And when this mass of cases put in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court have instituted a fact-finding commission headed by Justice Santosh Hegde, they have started, from this cycle of violence, they have started, I think, the cycle of violence has been halted and the cycle of accountability have started moving in. So the number of killing from in 2008 was about 400 and something. In 2013, after we have moved the Supreme Court and Supreme Court have actually started, standing up and started accountability process, the number have reduced to 2. And when Supreme Court have said that every case, despite of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, have to be investigated, Irom Sharmila moved out and wants to fight election and live a normal life. So I think the failure, rather than there's there's a saying that it's not just the thing of what the bad people do, but also what the good people are not doing. I think the biggest problem in this country is that the institutions who are supposed to stand up and fight for this basic rights are just abdicating and not doing so. When the Supreme Court stands up and say what the responsibility it has to take, things do change. This could have been done much earlier, and thousands of lives could have been saved if only the democratic institutions stood up and do what they are supposed to do.
Yeah, again, just time is really an enemy. I'll ask some quick questions. Before that, I just wanted to share with you that it's Bablu, who really shared those photographs, and you cannot imagine the danger that is, that they had to face, both the journalists who took those pictures. I don't know if you noticed that sequence, but this was an unarmed man who was taken into a pharmacy, shot dead, and Bablu did not mention that there was a pregnant woman with a 3-year-old, 4-year-old child. She was 5 months pregnant, called Rabina Devi, and she was also shot dead at the same time. The Justice Santosh Hegde Commission examined 6 random cases out of these 1,538 cases. One of those was a 12-year-old boy who was pulled out from his home in front of his father and shot dead in front of his father, but declared a militant. There was a 60-year-old woman in Malom. But these are the lives for whom Bablu and Colin speak up again and again. And it is really important for us to hear this because, as Bablu said, it creates a culture of accountability. But today, when we are breaking the backs of civil movements, and both the Congress and the BJP are very much responsible for breaking the backs of civil movements, civil society, we call them NGOs. We particularly middle-class Indians, are impatient with this process of questioning the state. It hurts our nationalism that men like Bablu and Colin exist. But as they said, from 498 killings, it's come down to 2, because somebody stood up and asked for the Constitution to be respected. And that is what these men represent. I'm going to not question them further, though I have many questions to share. Briefly, 2 questions from the audience, and then they're here with us for dinner. I hate to speak of dinner, but the Palms Country Club has put out a very lavish dinner in the lawn behind, and you can buy your coupons as soon as the session ends. I know you'll be in a hurry, so I'd like to share that information with you. Do stay on for dinner so you can converse more with Bablu and Colin and Javed Saab and Sharmila, and I'd like to have your question now. Yes.
I salute the lady who was on the dais, 16 years of fasting. But I don't have a question for her. I have a question for you all. Just tell me, how many of you have or children or child in the armed forces? Can I have some raised hands, please? How many of you are here who have served the country in the armed forces? At least one hand. Grateful. One more. Great. So am I. Quick question. Why does the army go into a state to stop all that's happening in that state? Simple reason. Because the politicians fail us. Mr. Chidambaram is here. Will he tell us why did the army go into Manipur? Why did the army go into J&K? Simple reason. Only one reason. Because they failed us. Who elected them? Us. Hang on, ma'am, hang on. Please give me 2 minutes of patient listening.
Sure.
I'm a veteran. I have my right. Second, when Burhan Wani died or killed or whatever you call it, he did have a human rights. The chief minister says, you should have arrested him. Absolutely correct. Somebody should have gone there and said, buddy, please give me a weapon and please come with me. I'm here. There has been excesses. There has been mistakes. It happens everywhere. Where doesn't it happen? It doesn't happen in a civil society. There are ministers who are corrupt. There have been ministers who are, whatever you can call them. But does the whole class stand for that? We are talking about one thing, Armed Forces Special Power Act. What reason? Who gave them this power? Same parliament. Because of what reason? Because our politicians could not hold the integrity of this country.
Thank you, sir.
Now,
thank you.
Just a second, ma'am. Please. I have my human rights. I have my human rights and my time rights. And I have bought my time rights.
I respect
that. So
that,
give
sir.
me that. Give me those 2 minutes. Maybe one more minute also. Now, most of you don't have a child in the armed forces, so you will not understand the pain of it. When the child goes out, his hands are tied at the back. Even today in J&K, when the J&K is boiling, Manipur is calmed down quite a bit. I've operated there. Manipur has calmed down. When J&K is boiling, our politicians say, no Armed Force Special Power Act. Where is the police? Where is the police? Who is going to hold your state for you? Simple reason or simple solution, give it to Pakistan. Be very happy about it. Is that what we're talking about? Are we? What is the army about? Whose army it is? Who are the people there? It is same from all states of India. They are from Manipur as well. You think the army is draconian? And the law, the catchword, draconian law. What is it talking about? It is simple. It is your country. You got to hold it. Who's going to hold it for you?
Thank you, sir. I think that's a very fair sentiment. I'd like to say one thing, and I'm glad, sir, that you stood up and said it, that indeed the voice of the army is missing in this conversation. Partly it's missing because we do understand naturally that position, that the army has been sent in there and that they are operating in the line of duty. Colin himself mentioned that when they actually kill somebody in combat, even human rights activists salute them, would pin a medal on them. The conversation here was about extrajudicial killing, and definitely the environment for that is created by politicians, but I'd like Colin to respond to that, actually.
So I appreciate your comment, and I can understand a large part of it, and I can support a large part of it. No disagreement. But I must tell you, my personal experience, because we cross-examined the army officers and the police commandos, it was the first time we had access to quite senior army officers who were in the dock when they were being cross-examined. And it appears to me, I'm not an expert really, but it appears to me that though a large bulk of the army stays true to the spirit of the army, that is to say, to uphold the integrity, the unity of the country, the integrity of the borders, and so on. There is within the army a growing body of rogue elements in certain areas.
Sir, only because it's a structure that's...
No, I'll just finish, sir. I'll just finish. I'll just finish, sir, in a minute, because you know.
Sir, just let him have his say.
I'll
We'll
just
hear
finish.
you.
See, I have a very limited experience. I yield to your greater, understanding if you've been in the forces. My father was in the forces, but I really didn't really understand things then. There's a growing body of rogue elements who do things that are totally atrocious. Now, you'll expect it in a big army, in a big air force, in a big, services like ours. You'll expect there'll be rogue elements. But what worries me, and this is what I told the senior officers who attend the court proceedings, very senior officers come. I said, what worries me is that at the top echelons of the army, you don't stand firm that when you know that an officer has killed a person in cold blood, and you have doubts as to whether that person is the terrorist at all, you still stand by that. And it is very important for the strength of the army, in my understanding. The more you catch your own rogue elements and punish them, openly, transparently, bring the victims' families in, take their testimonies and so on, punish them, the army becomes stronger as an institution. And what the Attorney General said in court, what was said in court on behalf of the Central Forces, that, sir, if we take any one of them to task, it has an effect on morale. I think that is fundamentally wrong. Morale will be strengthened. Integrity will be strengthened. Morality will be strengthened. Uprightness, all the elements of the armed forces, which every armed force personnel should have, and very often does have, most often does have. By catching them and punishing them, your army will become stronger. That is what the army as an institution, the top people in the army, perhaps realize. And you may be right when you say politicians tie their hands. They don't allow them to take any action. At the very highest levels of governance in this country, the ministers, the home ministers, etc., I don't think they allow them to act fearlessly. That is my view.
In a largely corrupt society, one of the few institutions that serves absolutely unselfishly is the Indian Army.
Agreed.
I'd like to ask you, how many of you know the rigors our Jawans go through when they protect our borders, build a bridge that's collapsed, or pull a child out from a well in a village? How many of you know that when we go to Amritsar and we sit at that border and clap for what the army does, they don't have mosquito nets to prevent them from dengue? How many of you know that in Siachen, very few of the provisions that are supposed to reach there are enough for them and for their well-being? It's okay to sit here and have the armchair diplomacy that we have, but I must say that in a society that is largely corrupt, what percentage of the army must hang its head in shame versus the percentage of our social fabric, our politicians, our police, and us that should hang our heads in shame? So before we point our fingers to the best thing that's happened in this country, for if Indian Army today stands up the way the Pakistani army has, none of us can breathe the free air that we do today. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll stop this here. I'm just going to respond to that for one moment, ma'am. I would apologize deeply if either as the hosts of this evening and the moderator of this conversation, if one transmitted a blanket condemnation of the army. If we have transmitted that, I deeply apologize. Because that is not the intention. Sir, just a minute. Sir, may I have a minute? Sir, just a minute. So,
wait.
So,
She's saying something. She's saying something.
So, maybe, okay. Poonam, just a minute. Sir, may I ask you for one moment of courtesy, sir? Yeah. Okay, fair enough, sir. Yeah, so I'll give you the statistic now, 900 in Manipur. I'll give you the statistic. 900 Jawans shot in the conflict. So I just want to say one thing, and we will have to close. This is not a condemnation of the army. I think I will remind you what Colin said, that even as a human rights activist, we salute the army. I think all of us respect the army as an institution. We are talking about excesses, and we are talking about accountability. And this is precisely the sentiment, sir, that criticism does not become rejection. When we criticize our country, we are not rejecting the country. When we criticize aspects of the army, we are not rejecting the army. I think all of us would salute the army as an institution. We are fighting its excesses. Thank you very much. Please join us for dinner outside. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Bablu. Thank you, everybody.